Our numbers are hard to see. So, let's see.
I'll just get these ready for you.
Oh, I'm gonna get the zoom right here.
Oops.
Electric shock and arc flash are both serious life-threatening hazards. Let's look at the differences between these two phenomena. Select each button to learn more. Arc flash occurs during a short circuit when a conductive object inadvertently bridges an energized conductor to ground or to another energized conductor. Arc flash is the visual electrical light and heat that occurs during an arc fault and is intense enough to vaporize metal. A simple act, such as dropping a screwdriver into an electric panel, could cause arc flash. Compromised insulation or a loose connection on equipment can also lead to arc flash. Electric shock occurs when some part of a worker's body or an extension, such as a conducting metal tool, comes into direct contact with energized electrical conductors or circuit parts of 50 or more volts, and the current finds a path to ground through the body. Select each image to learn more about arc flash and electric shock hazards and injuries. Exposure to arc flash causes severe burns due to heat, eye injury due to intense ultraviolet and infrared light, and other injuries related to explosion. For example, hearing damage due to sound pressure from rapid air expansion and wounds from flying shrapnel and molten metal. The occurrence and severity of arc flash injury depend on the available current and the duration of the arc. The arc will burn in open air until upstream protection devices, such as ground fault circuit interrupters or equipment failure, interrupts the current. Arc flash temperatures can reach up to 35,000 degrees Fahrenheit, almost 4 inches from the origin of the arc in a high-voltage, high-current installation. Blast pressure can exceed 2,000 pounds per square foot. Electric shock hazards associated with electrical work include electrocution, tissue and organ damage, and suffocation. The occurrence and severity of the injury depend on the amount of current and the path the current takes through the victim's body. The impact of accidents related to hazardous energy sources goes far beyond the physical damage. The loss or injury of a loved one or coworker has long-term psychological and emotional impacts on friends, family, and coworkers, and can devastate morale and productivity in the workplace. Workers who sustain life-altering injuries may lose their livelihood, experience diminished mobility and quality of life, and have extensive psychological and emotional issues for years to come. Here is a practice activity to test your knowledge. Complete the exercise by selecting and dragging each item to the appropriate column, depending on whether it describes arc flash or electric shock.
Second-degree burns to the victim's face.
Is he going to be okay?
We're bringing him in now.
Dang it, Chad, I'm sorry. I thought he knew better. I knew better too, but that doesn't do us a whole lot of good now.
Electrical components operating at 50 volts or above must be put in an electrically safe condition before any work is performed on them. Electrically safe means the equipment has been de-energized, including stored and potential energy, through a lockout and tagout procedure. Due to the nature of the work or the risk of de-energizing, such as causing an interruption to life support or ventilation systems, it isn't always possible to create an electrically safe condition. So the job briefing a competent person conducts before starting each job, whether energized or de-energized, is critical for worker safety. Employers appoint electrically qualified workers who have demonstrated skills and knowledge related to the construction and operation of electrical equipment and installations. These workers have knowledge and training to perform one or more specific tasks and sufficient safety training to recognize and address the specific electrical hazards associated with those tasks. By contrast, a qualified electrician is a tradesperson specializing in the electrical wiring of buildings, stationary machines, and related equipment. An electrician has more extensive safety training and more experience performing a variety of electrical tasks. A company does not have to turn to a qualified electrician for every electrical task, as long as the worker assigned to perform the task meets the criteria of a qualified electrical worker for that specific task. A qualified electrical worker establishes approach boundaries for the hazards involved in working on or near energized equipment during pre-planning for the job briefing. To do this, qualified workers often use the approach boundary tables in the NFPA 70E or in an employer's safe work practice tables. Select each boundary to learn more. The arc flash boundary marks the outer edge of the flash protection zone. It shows the minimum safe distance from energized equipment that could cause an arc fault. If a worker is standing at this distance without proper protective equipment, PPE, during an arc flash, they could suffer a second-degree burn from the heat. Only qualified workers are allowed to work inside this boundary. Workers who are not fully qualified may enter the area for on-the-job training if they have shown they can safely do the task. They must wear the correct PPE and be with a qualified person who always supervises them. If the arc flash boundary is farther out than the shock protection boundary, workers must follow the greater, farther distance. Before working on or near energized parts, there must be a written plan or work permit approved by management. A qualified person must also hold a job briefing to explain the work and any hazards to other workers. The limited approach boundary establishes a line that only qualified workers can cross to do a specific job. This boundary provides a significant margin of error for a worker unfamiliar with or unaware of the shock risks and enough space for correction if the worker comes too close to an energized hazard. Unqualified workers doing on-the-job training for tasks they have demonstrated an ability to safely perform are allowed to cross this boundary with appropriate PPE if they are continuously accompanied and directly supervised by a qualified person. If a limited approach boundary for shock protection is farther than the arc flash boundary, the arc flash boundary moves back to coincide with the limited approach boundary as a matter of convenience. A written plan or work permit approved by management must be in place for work on or near energized parts, and a qualified person must conduct a job briefing for other workers. The restricted approach boundary establishes a line that only qualified workers can cross and is usually about 1 foot from the energized components. This buffer gives a qualified person a position from which to conduct all tasks not directly associated with the energized components. It also takes into account the human element, which includes accidental movements that could bring an arm or held wire into contact with the shock hazard. Unqualified workers doing on-the-job training for tasks they have demonstrated an ability to safely perform are allowed to cross this boundary with appropriate PPE if they are continuously accompanied and directly supervised by a qualified person. The restricted approach boundary is rarely marked because it is so close to the work area. A written plan or work permit approved by management must be in place for work on or near energized parts, and a qualified person must conduct a job briefing for other workers. The leading causes of accidental power line contacts involve heavy equipment, long-handled tools, and ladders or other items carried by workers while in close proximity to power lines. Unqualified workers must maintain a distance of 10 feet from unguarded, energized overhead lines of 50 kilovolts or less, and 10 feet plus 4 inches for every 10 kilovolts over 50 kilovolts. A general industry qualified electrical worker is not considered an electrically qualified worker when it comes to utility power lines. An accident can easily happen. In this example, workers installing a chain-link fence directly under an overhead power line were electrocuted when one of the workers raised a long section of top rail and brought it into contact with the lime. In this example, the boom of a concrete pump contacted overhead power lines as it was guided over a pour. Both the nozzle man and a fellow worker who attempted to assist him received massive electric shocks and burns. Read a description of Stan and Ashley's morning work task and then select Continue. Area protections for the hazards involved. Select the Check My Answer button to see how you did. Chad is recovering from the burns he sustained and will be back at work in a few weeks. Although Marvin explained the risks of the job to Chad when they first started, they failed to use the proper barricade and the proper PPE, and Marvin paid little attention to his inexperienced helper as they performed the work. Like many good workers, Marvin got caught up in getting the job done. It's a good bet that next time he'll pay attention to what's most important, keeping himself and his coworkers safe. As part of an overall occupational health and safety management system, employers must implement and document an electrical safety program that directs activity for risks associated with arc flash and electric shock hazards. To that end, employers design and develop electrical safety programs to include elements that consider the condition and maintenance of electrical systems and equipment, provide awareness of the potential electrical hazards for those who work around them, and instill and require self-discipline for all employees whose work involves electrical hazards. A good program identifies the principles and controls by which the program is measured and monitored, as well as the procedures employees use before starting work that involves any electrical hazards. Here are some big picture requirements for an electrical safety program. You can find additional details and supplemental information in the NFPA 70E to complement your company's specific topics and on-the-job training. Select the requirements to learn more. Your company's electrical safety program identifies the process a qualified employee uses before work starts to identify hazards, assess risks, and implement risk controls according to a hierarchy of methods. In order of priority, from most to least effective, the methods are elimination, substitution, engineering controls, administrative controls, and PPE. Before starting each job, a competent person conducts a job briefing with those involved. Each job briefing covers associated hazards, work procedures, special precautions, energy source controls, PPE requirements, and information on energized electrical work permit if required. An electrical safety program calls for a system of detailed audits. One is an administrative audit conducted and documented by the employer's supervisory representatives. It verifies that the electrical safety program's written principles and procedures are in compliance with the standard. Field work audits or inspections verify that workers follow the procedures of the electrical safety program. If the audit determines workers are not in compliance with the program procedures, an employer's representative determines the cause and takes corrective action, which could be discipline, retraining, or process improvement. Field audits occur yearly at a minimum, but as a best practice, audits are ongoing and happen weekly. If your work exposes you to an electrical hazard, your employer must provide training on specific hazards associated with electrical energy, safety-related work practices, procedural requirements, and the relationship between electrical hazards and possible injury. If you're a qualified electrical worker, the standard requires that you be trained in rescue, including methods of safe release of victims from contact with exposed, energized conductors or circuit parts. Some workplaces also require all electrical workers to be trained in first aid and CPR. Your training may be conducted in the classroom, on the job, or as a combination of the two, and the type and extent of training depends on the amount of risk your work involves. Employers must verify employee training annually and document it with the content, employee's name, and the dates of training when the worker demonstrates proficiency. Qualified worker training focuses on the construction and operation of equipment, specific work methods, and electrical hazards and injuries. Select the images for more information. Qualified workers who perform tasks within the limited approach boundary distinguish exposed energized electrical conductors and circuit parts from other parts of electrical equipment, determine nominal voltage of exposed energized electrical conductors and circuit parts, and are familiar with the appropriate tables for approach distances in NFPA 70E and corresponding exposure voltages. Qualified workers receive training on the decision-making process necessary to be able to perform job safety planning, identify electrical hazards, assess associated risks, and select the appropriate risk control methods from the hierarchy of controls. Qualified workers retrain annually if supervision or annual inspections indicate they are not complying with safety-related work practices, if they must use new technology or types of equipment, implement changes in procedures, or use safety-related work practices not normally used during regular job activities, or if tasks are performed less than once per year. Employees undergoing on-the-job training necessary to become qualified workers are considered to be qualified only if they have demonstrated an ability to perform specific duties safely at their level of training. Further, these workers can perform the specific duties only if they are under the direct supervision of qualified persons for the duration of those duties. In addition to setting up an electrical safety program, the NFPA 70E covers a variety of safety-related work practices, including precautions for workers such as personal protective equipment, job briefings and work permits, lock and tag procedures, and the use of test equipment. It also has requirements for special equipment, including electrolytic cells, batteries and battery rooms, lasers, and power electronic equipment. Here's a practice exercise to test your knowledge. Select and drag the true statements to the image on the left.
All right, 10 down, just a bazillion left to go.
At least we're not on the energized side, wearing Cat 4 PPE. I feel bad for those guys.
Yeah. These things are all the same. We don't need to do the whole checklist every time. Shoot. Do you think that's long enough?
You could try it.
Maybe I'll get lucky. You know, one day, I'm not gonna be able to crawl in and out of...
Oh! Brett! Hey! Are you okay?
The intention of electrical safety best practices and procedures is to keep you safe relative to electrical hazards in the workplace. This lesson introduces some common electrical safety best practices relating to risk control methods from the different levels within the hierarchy of controls. Your workplace may require additional best practices beyond those covered here. Your employer must identify and provide you with safety-related, site-specific work practices and train you in their application. Your responsibility is to implement the specific ones you need to do your job. While elimination of hazards is top priority in the hierarchy of controls, sometimes this isn't possible or feasible. Qualified electrical workers use lockout-tagout when the higher priority controls aren't available. Locks and tags are dedicated devices that specially trained workers attach to equipment or machinery to indicate someone is repairing or maintaining it, and that the energy for the equipment or machinery has been removed and isolated. The preferred method is to use both locks and tags, but some equipment can only be tagged. The meaning of tags alone is the same as for a tag in a lock. Do not attempt to remove the tag or re-energize the equipment. Please note that in the language of lock and tag requirements, authorized workers are general industry qualified electrical workers. Locks, tags, and additional energy control equipment are designed to protect you. Select each type of device to learn more. Locks must be sturdy enough so that they can only be removed by using excessive force, for example, by using bolt cutters, and have a unique key for each lock. Locks for use in a lock and tag program must be dedicated for that purpose and can often be purchased with differently colored plastic coatings. This distinguishes them from utility or general service locks. Please note that within a company, locks must be the same color and look the same in terms of having or not having a label. Tags communicate danger and have various warnings, including do not start, do not energize, do not operate, and do not close. Tags are sometimes red or use red text to call attention to warnings. They may also have identifying information about the authorized worker who placed them. Tags with photographs, as well as worker names and departments, are becoming more common. Workers may require additional equipment to isolate an energy source. For example, if you have machinery that uses a unique valve as a control point, a conventional valve cover may not work. In this case, an authorized worker might wrap a chain around the valve handle and lock the chain in a way that prevents anyone from turning it. Other examples of additional equipment include fasteners, hasps, and gang lockboxes. When multiple workers must maintain control over an energy source, they may use a group or gang lockbox. This is usually a metal box that has the key to the locked-out equipment inside. The box has holes through its lid and side for multiple locks, so all workers involved in maintenance or repair can apply their lock. This prevents a single worker from retrieving the key and energizing the system while others are still working on it. For any task that requires you to place any part of your body where a machine's hazardous energy could put you at risk, your employer requires you to perform a lockout-tagout procedure to protect yourself. Select each button to learn about the steps in a typical lockout-tagout procedure. The first step is to prepare for the lockout-tagout by obtaining the approved procedure for the specific equipment you'll be working on from your supervisor or your facility's hazardous energy control program. You also need to identify all of the machine's energy sources. Some energy sources are visible and obvious, but stored energy often can't be observed. Pneumatic and hydraulic energy are common types of stored energy. When you take an inventory of the energy that powers a machine, be careful not to miss any hidden sources. The next step is to notify all affected employees that the machine must be locked out for service or maintenance. The operator may shut down their machine following normal procedures, but after doing so, they and all other non-authorized employees must avoid the area until the lockout-tagout is complete. After notifying others, use the established procedures for that equipment to physically locate all energy-isolating devices. These are the switches, valves, or other disconnects that control energy in the machine. Place each of these energy-isolating devices into the safe or off position. After putting all energy-isolating devices into the safe or off position, attach a lock and tag to each one to prevent the accidental startup of the machine. During a lockout procedure, only the person who attaches a lock or tag is allowed to remove it. The locks must be keyed differently, and each person must retain their key so that their lock can't be opened and removed by someone else. Even after you've isolated a machine's energy sources and applied locks and tags, there may still be stored or residual energy left in the machine. Examples include electrical energy in capacitors, mechanical energy in compressed springs, and gravitational energy in elevated parts. To work safely, you must release or restrain all stored energy using approved methods, such as discharging capacitors, releasing spring-loaded equipment, lowering suspended parts, and blocking movable parts. Once you've brought the machine to a zero-energy state, the next step is to confirm that the machine cannot be started through normal procedures. To do this, First, check that all employees are at a safe distance, then operate the start button or other operating controls. If the machine does not function, the test is successful, and you can return the controls to the neutral or off position. After confirming that you cannot start the machine through normal procedures, begin your maintenance, repair, or cleaning tasks. After you've completed your maintenance, repair, or cleaning tasks, begin the process of restoring energy by first inspecting the work area to ensure that all non-essential items, such as tools and spare parts, have been removed. Also check that all machine components are operationally intact and that machine guards are in place. After inspecting the work area, alert all employees in the area that power will be turned on, and, as a precaution, make sure they stay at a safe distance from the machine. Verify that the normal operating controls are in the off position, then remove the locks and tags that you placed on the machine. After removing the locks, restore power. If your employer's hazardous energy control program lists a specific sequence for properly re-energizing the machine, be sure to follow it. Once power is restored, notify affected employees that the lockout procedure is complete and the machine is ready for use. What would you do if you needed to use some equipment but it had been locked and tagged out? Read the following scenario and then select the Continue arrow. Up this order, and it requires this particular Frank really wants to finish up this order, and it requires this particular lathe. What should he do? Select the correct answer, then select the Check My Answer button. An important part of the work you do is likely to involve using equipment, such as meters and their associated leads, cables, power cords, and connectors to test electrical equipment or components. Testing equipment must be designed for its environmental exposure and the way you correctly use it, rated for the circuits and equipment for which you use it, and inspected and verified before each use on a scheduled basis. There are various types of meters, including volt, amp, rotation, frequency, and thermal. Only qualified electrical workers can perform tasks related to testing. Select each button to learn more. Qualified workers test, troubleshoot, and measure voltage within the limited approach boundary of energized electrical conductors or of circuit parts operating at 50 volts or more, or if an electrical hazard exists. To do this, they must have demonstrated the ability to choose the appropriate testing equipment and use it, and to read and interpret all device indicators. Task examples include the visual inspection of test instruments, equipment, and associated cables, leads, probes, and power cords prior to use, and verification of test instruments on a known voltage source before and after an absence of voltage test. If there is evidence of defective or damaged equipment during inspection that could place an employee at risk for injury, then the item must be taken out of service. No worker can use defective or damaged items until a qualified person has repaired them so that they are safe. Items that cannot be repaired must be destroyed or taken out of service. Not all qualified electrical workers are also qualified to remove defective or damaged items from service and repair them. Qualified electrical workers can perform these tasks only if they are specifically trained and qualified to remove and repair that particular item. Select and drag all tasks a qualified electrical worker can perform within the limited approach boundary. If the item is something the worker can do, it will remain in place. If it isn't something the worker can do, it will return to the left side of the window.
I don't know. There was a flash and...
Brett received a concussion and second-degree burns to his face. Both Brett and Mike were unaware that the breaker diagram was not up to date, and so they missed the energized control power transformer mounted in the top corner of the cabinet. Although the job briefing checklist required that they test each unit for voltage, they only tested voltage on the first one. As luck would have it, they missed the energized transformer and made it through the first 10 units without a problem. That luck ran out on Unit 11, when Brett's grounding wire came in contact with the transformer. Brett's injuries weren't serious and he recovered, but both workers were written up for falsifying a job briefing checklist. You can bet neither of them will shortcut best practices again. Job briefings and energized work permits are critical tools for workers' safety. While only energized work requires a work permit, every job requires a job briefing. Job briefings focus on a job's dangers and ways to minimize them. They're essential job planning tools for key elements and must be conducted before starting each job. Job briefings are as long as necessary to ensure everyone's safety, but are usually shorter for routine tasks than they are for more complicated hazardous work. Any competent person can conduct a job briefing, but the person in charge of the work must ensure that one occurs. Changes during the course of work that might affect workers' safety require additional job briefings, and while there is no requirement that job briefings be documented, most employers realize that the best way to ensure that they happen is to have some kind of documentation, either a formal document or information on a legal pad. The information a job briefing provides can vary depending on the job. The items below represent typical topics covered. Select each one to learn more. A job briefing describes the tasks or work that you will do. For example, you might be running electronic tests and inspections, cleaning contacts or circuit boards, ensuring systems are grounded, and installing outlets, lighting fixtures, and switches. When electrical systems break down, you might be troubleshooting and fixing the problem. In addition to the obvious hazards of electrical shock and arc flash, a job briefing covers other hazards you might face while performing work. Some examples of these hazards are working in confined spaces or in spaces with mold or rodent droppings. Depending on where you're working, there could be slip, trip, or fall hazards. Or you might be in places that require working in awkward positions or lifting heavy pieces of equipment. Job briefings cover risk reduction strategies or techniques that lessen the possibility of injury associated with electrical hazards encountered while completing specific tasks. The most obvious technique is to de-energize circuits associated with these tasks through lock and tag procedures. If lock and tag procedures aren't feasible or create more risk, you'll work under an energized work permit, which must detail the precise hazards and mitigation strategies for those hazards. Within the parameters of specific regulations, companies can develop their own procedures to comply. Even if you've read and been trained on the procedures before, a job briefing provides the necessary repetition to refresh your knowledge. If there have been changes in published procedures, a job briefing will alert you to these. Special precautions are particularly important when doing live work and must be covered in a job briefing. Some examples include avoiding standing water at all times, knowing the wiring code in your country, checking ground fault circuit interrupters frequently, and using circuit breakers with the appropriate current rating. Prior to a job briefing, a qualified person performs a risk assessment that determines the type and degree of particular hazards. Based on company procedure or on tables in the NFPA 70E, the person in charge of the work selects appropriate personal protective equipment for the task. Where there are electrical arc flash hazards, NFPA 70E guidance tables match the type and category of PPE you need for different levels of incident energy. Employers may authorize work on energized circuits and components of 50 volts or higher in certain circumstances. When this is the case, there must be an energized electrical work permit, and details are part of the job briefing. Energized electrical conductors and circuit parts that operate at less than 50 volts do not require a permit if there will be no increased exposure to electrical burns or explosion due to arc flash. Employees working alone do not require job briefings, but they must certainly be aware of hazards, work procedures, safety issues, and other issues included in a formal job briefing. If an employee is technically working alone, but coordinating with other workers who may also be working alone, the combined team must have a formal job briefing. Host employers brief contract employers on site-specific hazards, safety issues, design, and operation. Contract employers reciprocate by alerting host employers if they find any issues related to safety in the course of their work. Employers may authorize work on energized circuits and components of 50 volts or higher if de-energizing introduces additional hazards or increased risks, or if the necessary task is not feasible in a de-energized state due to equipment design or operational issues. For example, an interruption to life support or ventilation systems would introduce additional hazards. Qualified electrical workers performing tasks that meet either of these conditions must have an energized electrical work permit. Qualified electrical workers must have an energized electrical work permit when they work within the restricted approach boundary and when there is an increased likelihood of injury from exposure to arc flash related to work on equipment with energized conductors or circuit parts, even when conductors and circuit parts have insulating covers. Qualified workers using appropriate safe work practices and PPE are accepted from getting a permit if they are troubleshooting with meters or if they are standing outside the restricted approach boundary for thermal or visual scanning, working near energized equipment, or performing non-electrical tasks. While Brett and Mike were replacing cable wiring in the motor starter, another team was replacing a 4 kilovolt feeder bus to the main cabinet. Select each button to show a detailed section of the energized electrical work permit that authorized the live work. The request for a permit authorization must describe the circuit, associated equipment, and the location of both. In this example, Superintendent B. Reynolds requests a permit to replace and upgrade the 4 kilovolt feeder bus to the main cabinet. The request also provides the reason the equipment cannot be de-energized for the work. In this case, de-energizing introduces a safety risk by turning off all plant lighting during annual safety maintenance. Qualified workers list procedures they'll use to do the job safely. In this case, they'll install insulation in the form of a Class II blanket and micarta barrier between the work area and 4 kilovolt bus, and use insulated sticks to place the magnet-attached cover to avoid hand contact. There will be 2.5 feet of clearance from the energized bus, resulting in very limited risk. Voltage, approach boundaries, and acknowledgement of proper PPE complete the assessment. Part 2 continues with arc flash risk assessment exposure of 75 kiloamps at 36 inches for a qualified worker wearing Category 4 PPE. The arc flash boundary is 40 feet. A person, barricades, and signs will restrict access by unqualified people. The evidence that the person in charge of work has completed a job briefing is documented on a form titled S&H 002, and both workers have signed off that the work can be done safely. The final section of the energized electrical work permit contains signatures of the people approving the request, authorizing management, safety officer, or owner. Specifics of who this will be vary by business. In this case, there are 6 signatures. After work is complete, the energized work permit goes to the site safety department, where it is usually placed in the job file. Select and drag each item to the appropriate category depending on whether it describes job briefings, energized work permits, or is a characteristic of both. If you place the item in the correct category, it will remain in place. If you place it in an incorrect category, it will return to the left side of the frame and you'll receive feedback. After you've read the feedback, close the box and try placing the item again. PPE, or personal protective equipment, is employer-provided clothing and equipment that protects various parts of your body against hazards, such as arc flash and electric shock, which you may experience while performing your job. PPE should be effective, well-made, and comfortable. PPE only works if you wear it, maintain it, and inspect it, and make sure it's intended for the work you're doing. Take care of your PPE, and it will take care of you. Employers decide which of these two methods to use in selecting arc flash PPE, either an incident energy analysis or PPE category. Up-to-date PPE indicates a category range of 1 to 4, with 4 being the most protective based on the type and degree of hazard. When you work on or near energized electrical equipment, an unexpected electrical arc could expose you to burns and ultraviolet light. You must choose clothing and PPE with the correct arc thermal protection value, or ATPV. Here are some examples of appropriate and inappropriate clothing. Select each image to learn more. Within a flash zone, never wear clothing made from highly flammable or meltable materials, such as untreated polyester, nylon, acetate, or rayon. These materials can easily ignite and melt, exposing you to more serious skin burns. Next to your skin, wear only natural fabrics, such as cotton or wool. Unlike synthetics, these materials will not melt. Regardless of your personal clothing, remember that only arc-rated, flash-resistant clothing offers the required protection from breach and ignition. When you're exposed to incident heat energy of 2 calories per centimeter squared or higher, you must wear arc-rated, flash-resistant clothing with an ATPV rating that matches the analyzed exposure. At these heat exposure levels, even unrated natural fabrics could ignite, worsening a burn. The assortment of flash-resistant clothing you wear should be arc-rated at or above the hazard category to which you're exposed. Personal protective equipment, PPE, is employer-provided clothing and equipment that may be the only thing standing between you and serious injury. In order for this safety control to be effective, you must wear PPE that is appropriate for the specific parts of your body that require protection and for the work you'll be performing. PPE for electrical work falls into hazard risk categories based on the type and degree of hazard, ranging from 1 to 4, with 4 being the most protective. Select each object to learn the PPE requirements for those working with electricity. Wear non-conductive safety glasses or goggles for all levels of electrical work. Glasses with side protection provide the best protection from flying objects. If your eyeglasses have metal parts, prevent electrical contact hazards by wearing safety glasses or goggles over your metal frames, and also wear a protective face shield over your safety glasses or goggles. Use hearing protection when working within an arc flash boundary to protect your hearing in the event of an arc blast. Use non-conductive head protection whenever there is a danger of head injury due to electrical shock, burns, or from flying objects resulting from an electrical explosion. Hard hats rated as Class E are insulating safety hats, usually made of plastic or fiberglass. Manufacturers make and test Class E hard hats to successfully withstand 20,000 volts. Do not use hard hats that have any type of ventilation since they are typically not voltage rated. An arc-rated wraparound face shield protects your forehead, chin, ears, and neck from heat and arc flash or blast hazards. Balaclavas or an AR flash suit hood provide greater protection against thermal energy. You must also wear safety glasses or goggles under hoods or shields. You may wear plain leather work gloves for electrical work that falls into arc rating categories 1 and 2. If you are performing electrical work that falls into arc rating categories 3 and 4, you'll need to wear arc rated gloves. Wear heavy-duty leather footwear or dielectric footwear, or both, to protect from electrical hazards such as static discharge or electric shock. When working with electricity, wear non-conductive protective clothing. Next to your skin, wear only natural fabrics, such as cotton or wool, that will not melt. Wear ARC-rated long-sleeved shirts, long pants, jackets, coats, bib overalls, or coveralls. Never wear clothing made from highly flammable materials, such as untreated polyester, nylon, acetate, or rayon. You must wear ARC-rated flash-resistant clothing that is ARC-rated at or above the hazard category to which you are exposed. At high heat exposure levels, even unrated natural fabrics could ignite. Lockout-tagout procedures often involve uninsulated connections within cabinets or enclosures. You could encounter circumstances in which you might need hardcover plastic shielding and guards to protect you from uninsulated wire. Most electrical tasks will require you to use insulated tools and a voltmeter to measure the voltage in an electrical circuit. Depending on the work you are performing, you may need personal fall arrest equipment or other PPE. Your job or task may require that you work in a bucket or on a man lift or work platform. If you work more than 4 feet above ground level, you must use fall protection equipment to prevent free falls of more than 6 feet and contact with lower level obstructions. Fall protection requirements may differ if you work on a construction site. Fall arrest systems with energy absorption can limit the maximum force on your body and prevent severe injury to your back or neck through whiplash. Two components comprise the type of fall arrest system you are likely to wear. Make sure to inspect each component before use to ensure they're both in safe working condition. Replace any item with rips, tears, arc flash damage, or discoloration from ultraviolet light. Select each component to learn more. A body harness is part of a personal fall arrest system. Secure it over your shoulders, secure it around your waist, buckle it at your legs, ensure it fits snugly, and then attach the deceleration device or lanyard to the body harness. At a minimum, shock-absorbing lanyards must be made of half-inch nylon, or the equivalent. Prevent a free fall of more than 6 feet, and soften the impact of a fall. You can use lanyards vertically or horizontally. Attach them above the point of operation to an anchor or fixed object that can support a minimum dead weight of 5,000 pounds. For a work site with an analyzed incident heat energy exposure of 1.5 calories per centimeter squared, which of these shirts should you wear next to your skin? Select all the allowable clothing. Then select Check My Answer to see how you did. Never wear clothing made from untreated synthetic fibers, such as polyester, nylon, acetate, or rayon. An arc flash could readily ignite these fabrics. Next to your skin, wear only natural fabrics, such as cotton or wool.